Hello guys, welcome back to Godfrey's Story Time, and I'm having some amazing story for you today. Kindly let's listen to this amazing story that I'm talking about. Kindly let's listen.
My name is Ruth Ann Hargrove, and I have been carrying this story inside me like a stone in my chest for a long time now. Not because I am ashamed of it. Well, carry it because it still amazes me. It amazes me how blind love can make a smart woman. And it amazes me even more what a mother will do when her child is standing on the edge of a cliff and does not even know it. I want to tell you everything. From the very beginning. Because the beginning matters just as much as the ending does. The morning of my daughter's wedding was a Saturday. The kind of Saturday that comes in clean and bright like it has been washed overnight. I had been up since 5 in the morning. Not because I could not sleep. I slept just fine actually. I woke up because my body knew something big was coming. Like how the air changes right before a storm. You cannot explain it. You just feel it in your bones, and your bones have never lied to you yet. I made myself a pot of coffee and stood at the kitchen window and watched the sky go from dark blue to pink to gold. My little dog Pepper was sitting at my feet like she always does in the mornings. Just the two of us in the quiet house. My husband Gerald passed away 4 years ago, and it has just been me and Pepper since then. But that morning I did not feel alone. I felt like Gerald was somewhere close. Like he was watching too. My daughter's name is Nadia. Nadia Grace Hargrove. She is 31 years old, and she has her father's eyes and my stubbornness and a laugh that can fill up a whole parking lot. She is a good woman. A generous woman. The kind of woman who remembers everybody's birthday and brings food when someone is sick and never asks for anything in return. She has always been like that. Even as a little girl she was always giving things away. Her lunch. Her toys. Her time. When Nadia told me she had met someone I was glad. Truly glad. She had been on her own for a while after her last relationship ended badly. That man had been careless with her. Careless in ways that take a long time to undo. So when she came home one Sunday afternoon last spring with her eyes lit up like Christmas and told me about a man named Derek, I put my hand over hers and I said, "Tell me everything." And she did. She talked for 2 hours straight. Derek Nolan. That was his name. He was tall. He had a good smile. He worked in real estate development and he drove a clean car and he always opened doors. That was what Nadia noticed first. The doors. She said he always moved a little ahead of her just to get there first. I thought about that later. A man who always moves ahead of you is not always doing it to be kind. Sometimes he is doing it to stay in front. But I did not think about that then. Then I just thought it was nice. The engagement happened fast. 6 months from meeting to ring. I will be honest with you. 6 months felt quick to me. I said that to Nadia once and she looked at me with that patient look she has and she said, "Mama, when you know you know." And what could I say to that? When I met Gerald I knew in 3 weeks. So I nodded and I kept my mouth quiet and I helped her plan the wedding with everything I had. 'Cause that is what you do when you love someone. You show up for them even when a little voice in the back of your head is whispering something you cannot quite hear. The wedding was held at a venue called the Hawthorne House. It is an old estate on the edge of town with big white columns out front and a garden in the back that goes on longer than you would expect. Nadia had always wanted to get married somewhere with a garden. She told me that when she was 9 years old. We were driving past a church with roses growing along the fence, and she said, "Mama, someday I am going to get married somewhere with a whole garden around me." I never forgot that. Mothers do not forget those things. We had spent 8 months planning. 8 months of venue visits and cake tastings and flower arrangements and seating charts. 8 months of phone calls with the caterer and arguments about whether the napkins should be ivory or cream and late nights folding little paper programs by hand because Nadia wanted them to feel personal. 8 months of the two of us building something together piece by piece the way mothers and daughters do when a wedding is coming and the whole world feels like it is on your side. I arrived at Hawthorne House 2 hours before the ceremony. I had my dress in a garment bag and my shoes in a box and a little card in my purse that I had written to Nadia the night before. Nothing fancy. Just a few sentences from a mother to her daughter. The kind of words you practice saying out loud but end up having to write down because your voice gives out before you finish. I planned to give it to her right before she walked out. One last quiet moment, just the two of us before everything changed. The venue was already humming when I got there. People moving in every direction. The florist was arranging tall white flowers at the ends of the chairs in the garden. The caterers were setting up tables with silver and glass that caught the morning light and threw little bright pieces of it across the walls. The wedding coordinator, a brisk woman named Sheila, was walking fast with a clipboard pressed to her chest and a headset around her neck like she was running a small country. I like Sheila. She made me feel like everything was under control. Derek's mother was already there too. Her name was Patricia Nolan. She was a small woman with sharp blue eyes and silver jewelry, and a way of looking at a room like she was calculating something. She had always been pleasant to me. Perfectly pleasant. She remembered my coffee order and she asked about my garden and she sent a very nice card when Gerald died even though she had never met him. I had no real reason to distrust her. That is the thing about people like Patricia. They give you no real reason. Until they do. I greeted Patricia near the entrance and we talked for a few minutes about the weather and the flowers and how beautiful the venue looked. She held both my hands when she said it and told me that Nadia was just the loveliest girl and that Derek was so lucky. I smiled and agreed and meant every word of my agreement because I did believe it then. I believed my daughter was loved. I believed this day was what it looked like. I was wrong. But I did not know that yet. I still had about 45 minutes of not knowing. I walked through the main hall to find Nadia. She was getting ready in a suite at the back of the estate with her bridesmaids. 3 of them. Her best friend Camille from college, her cousin Tanya, and a woman she had worked with for years named Joy. I could hear them from down the hall. Laughing and music playing softly and someone saying, "Hold still, I am not done yet." That sound stopped me for a second. My daughter laughing on her wedding morning. I wanted to hold it in my hands. I knocked and Camille opened the door and pulled me inside, and there was Nadia sitting in front of the mirror in her robe with her hair half pinned up and her face glowing. She saw me in the mirror and she turned around and she said "Mama," and her voice was so soft when she said it. I went to her and I hugged her and she smelled like the perfume I gave her for Christmas 3 years ago and I thought, this is it. This is the moment. This is one of those moments you will remember when you are very old and everything else has blurred at the edges. I did not stay long. I did not want to crowd her. I told her she was beautiful. She told me not to make her cry before her makeup was done. I laughed and promised and backed out of the room and closed the door softly and stood in the hallway for a moment with my hand still on the door handle. Just breathing. Just letting myself feel how full of something good I was. I had a daughter who was happy. I had done enough right things in this life to end up in that hallway on that morning. That was what I thought. I decided to walk outside to the garden for a few minutes before the guests started filling it up. I wanted to see it empty. Just once. The way it looked before people arrived and filled every space with themselves. I had learned that trick from Gerald. He always said the best part of any beautiful place is the 10 minutes before anyone else gets there. He was right about a lot of things. I walked down the long side corridor that ran along the back of the house with tall windows on one side looking out over the lawn. The corridor was quiet. Nobody else was in it. The sound from the main hall was muffled behind the walls. My heels made small sounds on the old wooden floor. There were black and white photographs hung along the wall. Portraits of old families who had lived in the house long ago. Serious faces with straight mouths looking out at me as I walked past them. I was looking at one of them and not really paying attention to where I was going when I heard something from behind a door to my left. It was a storage room of some kind. Or maybe a small office. The door was pulled mostly closed but not all the way. And 2 voices were coming through that gap. One I knew immediately. Derek. His voice has a particular quality to it. Smooth and even and never too loud. The kind of voice that sounds like it has been practiced. The second voice took me only a moment longer. Patricia. His mother. They were talking like people talk when they believe with absolute certainty that no one can hear them. I stopped walking. I was not trying to listen. I want to say that very clearly because it matters. I am not a person who listens at doors. My mother raised me better than that. But when your child's name comes out of a room in a voice that does not sound like "love," your feet stop moving on their own. Your whole body just stops. Derek said her name. Nadia. And the way he said it was not the way a man says the name of someone he adores. It was the way you say a word that is useful to you. He said Nadia has no idea what she is walking into. Patricia laughed. It was a quiet laugh. Controlled. Like she had measured exactly how much sound to let out. She said that is exactly how we need it. Derek said she thinks I proposed because I fell for her. Patricia said, and did you? There was a pause. Then Derek said she is fine. She is genuinely sweet. But no. Not like that. I put my hand flat against the wall beside me. The old wallpaper was cool under my palm. Pressed hard. Patricia said, what about the mother? And Derek said Ruthen. He used my name. My whole name. Ruthen. In that same measuring voice. He said she is the real number. She sold that manufacturing business 5 years ago. She owns 3 properties outright. Gerald left everything to her. We are talking about somewhere around 50 million if everything moves the way I think it will. Patricia made a small satisfied sound. Like someone who has just been told a meal they ordered is ready. Derek said Nadia is generous to a fault. She does whatever makes me comfortable. Once we are married I will have time. Time to get comfortable in the finances. Time to get our names linked on things. He said it so calmly. Like it was a project plan. Like my daughter was a step in a process and I was a resource to be accessed. I stood in that corridor and I felt something I have only felt a few other times in my life. Not anger. Not exactly. Something colder. Something that switches your emotions off and switches something else on. I walked away from that door. Very quietly. I did not want them to hear me. I walked back down the corridor the way I had come and I went into the small bathroom near the entrance and I locked the door and I stood at the sink and I looked at myself in the mirror. My dress was pale green. My hair was done up nicely. I had pearl earrings in that had been Gerald's mother's. I looked like a woman going to a wedding. I looked like a mother who had gotten everything ready and done everything right. And none of it had mattered. I turned on the cold water and I held my wrists under it. That is something my grandmother used to tell me to do when I was upset. Hold your wrists under cold water and breathe and let your body understand that you are still in charge of it. It works. As always worked. I stood there for a full 2 minutes. The water ran cold over my wrists and I breathed and I thought. I did not cry. There was no time for crying. There was only time for thinking, and I am very good at thinking when it matters. The first thing I thought was that I needed to be sure. Not because I doubted what I had heard. I heard it clearly. Every word. But I needed to be absolutely certain before I did anything. Because what I was about to do was going to change everything. And you do not change everything based on something you only think you heard. You change everything based on something you know. And I knew. But I wanted more than knowing. I wanted something that could stand in a room and speak for itself. I dried my hands. I straightened my dress. I put my shoulders back. I unlocked the bathroom door and I walked out into the main hall like a woman who was simply having a lovely morning at her daughter's wedding. I smiled at the florist. I nodded at a cousin of Gerald's who was coming in through the front door. I picked up a glass of water from a passing tray and sipped it slowly. And while I did all of these normal ordinary things, my mind was moving very fast behind my eyes. My phone was in my little bag. A small green bag that matched my dress. I slipped my hand inside and felt for it. Had an idea. It was not a complicated idea. It was actually a very simple one. The simplest ideas are usually the ones that work. I found my phone and I typed a quick message to my nephew Darnell. Darnell is 34 years old and he works in technology, and he is one of those people who always knows what to do in a situation that requires both speed and quiet. He was already at the venue. I had seen him earlier. I texted him and said I need you right now. Side corridor by the back of the house. Do not ask me questions. Just bring your phone and come fast. Darnell texted back in under a minute. My way. That is one of the things I love about Darnell. He does not need a reason to show up for family. He just shows up. He got to me in less than 3 minutes. He came around the corner looking calm, but his eyes were reading me fast. He said, Aunt Ruth, what is happening? I said I will explain everything. But first I need you to help me record something. I told Darnell in 3 sentences what I had heard. He did not flinch. He did not say, "Are you sure?" He just looked at me with steady eyes and nodded once and said okay. That one okay was worth more to me than 1,000 words would have been. I told him the room. I told him they were still likely in there. I said I do not know if they are still talking, but I need whatever we can get. He pulled out his phone and opened a recording app and held it in his hand naturally like he was just carrying it. We walked back down the corridor together. Me and Darnell, aunt and nephew, walking slowly, talking quietly about nothing. The weather, the flowers, just two people strolling. When we got near the door, I touched Darnell's arm lightly, and he nodded and tilted his phone toward the gap in the door without slowing down or stopping. We kept walking, past the door, to the end of the corridor. Then we turned around and walked back the same way, still talking about nothing. When we got back to the main hall, Darnell held his phone up and pressed play. His recording app had caught something. Not everything, but enough. Derek's voice, clear enough, saying Nadia's trust is the easiest part. And Patricia's voice responding. And a piece of the part about the money. About 50 million. About getting names on things. About patience. It was not everything I had heard. But it was real. It was there. It was in the air of that corridor, and now it was inside Darnell's phone, and it was not going anywhere. Darnell looked at me after we listened. His face was very still. He said, "Aunt Ruth, what do you want to do?" I said, "I am going to stop this wedding." He did not argue. He did not ask if I was sure. He said, "Tell me what you need." I said, "I need you to stay close, and I need you to have that recording ready, and I need you to not let Derek or Patricia see us talking." He said, "Understood." And that was it. That was our whole plan, made in under 60 seconds. Sometimes you do not have time for a long plan. Sometimes 60 seconds is all you get. The ceremony was set to begin in 20 minutes. The garden was filling up. I could see people taking their seats through the glass doors. Friends and family and neighbors and people from Nadia's work. People who had driven hours to be there. People who had bought gifts and wrapped them carefully and written cards and gotten dressed up and smiled all morning because they thought they were here to celebrate something real. I felt the weight of all those people. I felt it in my shoulders like a coat made of stone. I found Sheila, the coordinator, near the garden entrance. I pulled her aside quietly. I told her I needed to speak with the officiant before things began. She looked at me with professional calm and said, "Is everything all right?" I said, "I am not sure yet." She looked at me for 1 second and then she said, "I will bring him to you right now." She was good at her job. She did not waste time asking follow-up questions she did not need the answers to. She just moved. 3 minutes later she was back with the officiant, a man named Pastor Elroy. Pastor Elroy was a round, gentle man with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He had known our family for years. He had done Gerald's funeral service. He took my hand when he saw my face and he said, "Ruth, and what is going on?" I told him quietly and quickly. I did not leave anything out. While I talked, his face changed slowly. The pleasantness dropped away and something more serious took its place. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you have evidence?" I said, "My nephew has a recording." Pastor Elroy nodded and said, "Let me hear it." Darnell played the recording for Pastor Elroy right there in the side hallway. The three of us crowded together in that narrow space, listening to Derek's voice come out of a small phone speaker. Pastor Elroy listened with his eyes closed. When it was done, he opened his eyes and he looked at me and he said, "Ruth and I have been officiating weddings for 27 years. I have never stopped one before today." I said, "I know." He said, "But I will not stand at that altar and join your daughter to that man. Not now. Not after this." I said, "I need to talk to Nadia first. Before anything happens in front of everyone." He agreed. He said, "You have maybe 10 minutes before people start wondering where the bride is." I said, 10 minutes is enough." I walked back to the bridal suite. My heels were loud now in the corridor. I was not trying to be quiet anymore. I knocked on the door and Camille answered again, and I said, "I need a few minutes alone with my daughter." Camille looked at my face and stepped back without a word and pulled the others out with her. Nadia was standing near the window in her wedding dress when I came in and closed the door. She was fully dressed now. Her hair was pinned up with little white flowers threaded through it. Her dress was the color of fresh cream and it caught the light from the window and she looked like something out of a painting. She looked at me and she smiled first and then the smile changed. 'Cause she could read me. She has always been able to read me. She said, "Mama." Just that. Mama. And her voice was already asking the question her mouth had not formed yet. I sat down on the edge of the small settee near the window and I took her hands in mine. Her hands were cold. I held them firmly. I looked at her face and I said, "Baby, I need to tell you something and I need you to listen to all of it before you react." She looked scared. I could see the fear move across her face like a cloud shadow moving across a field. She said, "Is it something about Derek?" And I said yes. And I watched her face do several things at once. I told her everything. All of it. What I heard in the corridor. What Darnell recorded. I held nothing back and I softened nothing. Because she deserved the full truth. Not a gentle version of it. Not a protected version of it. The full thing. All of it landing on her at once. While I talked, she did not move. She sat completely still beside me, holding my hands and listening. Her eyes did not leave my face. She was doing what she always does when something is too much. She goes very quiet and very still and she lets herself take it in. When I finished talking, I said, "I am so sorry." I said, "I know this is the worst moment and I know this is the worst way to hear this and I am so sorry that I could not have known sooner or told you differently." Her eyes filled up. Not spilling over. Just full. She blinked slowly. Then she said, "Play it for me." I said, "Are you sure?" She said, "Play it, Mama." I texted Darnell and he came to the door and he played the recording through the door without coming in. Just the sound of it. Coming through the wood into that little room where me and my daughter sat holding hands. When it ended, Nadia let go of my hands. She stood up. She walked to the window and stood with her back to me for a moment. I did not say anything. I let her have that moment. The garden was visible through the window and I could see the guests in their seats down below. All those people waiting. All that hope sitting in white chairs in the sunshine. Nadia looked at them for a long time. Then she turned around and her face had changed. The fear was still there, but something else had come in over the top of it. Something steady. She said, "I knew something was off." She said it quietly. Almost to herself. She said, "I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. I kept explaining it away. The way he talked about finances. The way he always wanted to know what decisions I was making about the properties Dad left me. I said to myself, he is just interested. He is just being a partner." I said, "Stop being suspicious, Nadia." I told myself I was self-sabotaging. She stopped. Then she said I was not self-sabotaging. I was paying attention and I talked myself out of it. She said, "What are we going to do?" And the "we" of that sentence. The way she said "we" and not "you." That was the moment I knew she was going to be okay. Not right then. Not today. But eventually. She was still a "we" with me. She had not closed up or pushed me out. She was still standing in that room, choosing to figure this out together. I stood up and I went to her and I said, "We are going to walk out of this room together. And we are going to handle this. And you are going to be okay." She nodded once. Hard. Like a decision. I had already spoken with Pastor Elroy and he had agreed to make an announcement before the ceremony formally began. He would simply say that the ceremony would not be proceeding and ask guests to remain calm. He was going to do it with as much dignity as the situation allowed. But before he did any of that, I wanted to speak with Derek myself. I felt I owed Nadia that. Not a public scene. Private confrontation first. One chance for him to say something that might change what I knew. There was nothing he could say. But I wanted to offer it. I asked Sheila where Derek was. She hesitated for one small moment, and then she told me he was in the groom's suite on the other side of the estate. I walked there with Darnell beside me. I knocked and Derek opened the door himself. He was in his suit. A dark navy suit with a white flower on the lapel. He looked surprised to see me. He said, "Ruth, and is everything okay?" I thought about how good he was at that. Sounding natural. Sounding like a man who had nothing to hide. It was very good work. You almost had to admire the craftsmanship of it. I said I need a moment with you. He stepped aside and let me in. Darnell stayed in the doorway. Derek looked at Darnell and then back at me, and I could see the first small flicker of something behind his eyes. The first crack in the surface. I said I was in the corridor about an hour ago. I said I was walking to the garden, and I walked past a room with a door that was not all the way closed. He went very still. That is when I knew he already understood what I was going to say. Because innocent people do not go still like that. I said I heard your conversation with your mother. I heard what you said about Nadia. I heard what you said about me and about my money and about your plan. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again and said whatever you think you heard. I held up my hand. I said, Darnell, please play the recording. Darnell pressed play and held the phone into the room. Derek's own voice came out of the speaker. Smooth and even and completely relaxed. Saying exactly what he had said. No room for interpretation. No way to reshape it. Derek's face went through 4 or 5 different things very fast. Surprise. Calculation. Something that tried to look like hurt. Then a settling. Like a man putting something down he had been carrying. He said, I can explain this. I said, I know you believe that. I said, I want you to know that I am not going to make a scene in front of all those people if I can help it. I said, Pastor Elroy is going to make an announcement. The ceremony is not happening today. I said, if you leave quietly right now, I will give you that much. That is all I am giving you. He did not leave quietly right then. He stood there for another few seconds looking at me. And I will tell you what I saw in his eyes during those seconds. I saw him running the numbers one more time. Looking for a path through. Some angle he had not tried. Some way this could still go the direction he needed it to go. And I let him look. I stood there in that groom's suite in my pale green dress with my pearl earrings and my hands folded in front of me, and I let him look. Because I knew what he was going to find. Nothing. There was nothing left. He picked up his jacket from the chair. He straightened his cuffs. He said, this is not over. Said, yes it is. He walked out. He passed Darnell in the doorway, and Darnell moved just enough to let him through and no more. We heard his footsteps go down the hall. Then we heard a door. Then we heard nothing. I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. Darnell said, Aunt Ruth, are you okay? I said, I will be. Let's go find Pastor Elroy. And we went. What happened in the garden next is something I will remember for the rest of my life. All those people in their white chairs. The flowers in their arrangements. The string quartet that had been playing soft music going quiet when Pastor Elroy walked to the front. He was calm. He was dignified. He said good morning to everyone like it was a regular Sunday. He said he had an announcement to make. He said the ceremony would not be taking place today. He said he was sorry for any inconvenience and that the family was grateful for everyone's love and presence. There was a sound that went through the crowd. Not loud. More like a wave passing underwater. People turning to each other. People looking around for understanding. I was standing at the edge of the garden near the back. Nadia was inside still. I had not wanted her to hear the announcement from out there. I had wanted her somewhere private while the initial shock moved through the crowd. Patricia was somewhere in the garden. I could not see her from where I was standing. I did not go looking. The guests began to move and talk and gather in small groups the way people do when something unexpected happens and no one knows quite what to do with their hands. Some people came to find me. Close family first. Gerald's brother Earl came and took my hand without saying anything. He just stood next to me. That was exactly right. Nadia's friend Camille appeared from inside and put her arm around my waist. Joy was already on the phone. Tanya was managing the flow of people trying to get to Nadia's room with quiet, steady calm. I went back inside to Nadia. She was sitting in the chair by the window again. She had taken the white flowers out of her hair. They were in a small pile on the windowsill. She still had her dress on. She was looking at her phone. When she heard me come in, she put the phone face down on her knee and looked at me. She said, people are texting me. I said, I imagine they are. She said, what do I say? I said, you do not have to say anything right now. She said, Mama, I am not embarrassed. She said it firmly, like she was deciding it as she said it. I sat down next to her. She said I keep thinking about all the little things I pushed away. The time he said I was too emotional about money decisions. The time he made a joke about prenuptial agreements that did not really feel like a joke. The time he asked me 3 times in 1 week what the property on Garland Street was valued at. She said I knew. Some part of me knew. I said I think you did know. She said why did I not listen to that part? I said because you wanted it to be wrong. Because wanting something to be okay is a very powerful force. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said what about Patricia? What does she do now? I said I imagine she will leave very soon if she has not already. Nadia said she came to 3 of our family dinners. She sat at our table. She told me I was perfect for her son. I said I know. Nadia said that is the part that makes me feel the worst. Not Derek. Patricia. Because Derek was doing what he decided to do, and at least that is a person acting on his own awful decision. But Patricia is his mother. She looked at him and decided to help him. I stayed with Nadia for a long time that afternoon. The venue staff were extraordinarily kind. Sheila came in at some point and said quietly that the guests had mostly dispersed. That food had been wrapped and sent home with family. That anything we needed was available. She did not ask any questions. She did not offer any opinions. She just made herself available and then stepped back. I thought that was one of the most quietly decent things I saw that whole day. Knowing when to be helpful and when to get out of the way. Darnell stayed all afternoon. He sat in the hallway outside Nadia's room for hours. Just in case. In case what I do not know. In case something was needed. In case someone showed up who should not have. In case Nadia needed someone other than her mother for a while. He ordered food for everyone from a place nearby. He dealt with a family group chat so I did not have to. He is a good young man. Gerald would have been very proud of him. I told him so later and he got a little misty about it. Patricia had left the venue before I got back to the garden. I was told by Sheila that she had gone quickly and without speaking to anyone. That sounded right. That sounded like a person who had calculated the situation and determined that the exit was the correct move. I do not know what she said to Derek that evening. I do not know what that conversation looked like. I imagine it was not pleasant. But then again I do not think either of them deserved pleasant just then. I think they deserved whatever they said to each other. Nadia and I drove home together that evening in my car. She had taken her dress off and changed into clothes she had in the overnight bag she had planned to take on the honeymoon. A pair of soft pants and a blue sweater she has had for years. She looked more like herself in those clothes than she had all day in the dress. We did not talk much on the drive. We had the radio on low. One of those stations that plays old quiet songs. We watched the evening come in through the windshield. Purple and orange over the fields outside town. When we got to my house I made us both tea and we sat at the kitchen table. Pepper jumped up into Nadia's lap immediately and she buried her face in the dog's fur for a long time. I did not say anything. Sometimes the right thing to do for someone you love is to make the tea and sit down and let them have the dog in the silence for as long as they need. The clock on the wall ticked. Tea steamed. Outside the window the last of the light was going. I thought about Gerald. I thought about how much I wished he was in that kitchen with us. Nadia said she had one question she could not stop thinking about. I said go ahead. She said do you think he ever felt anything real for me at all? I thought about that carefully before I answered. I said I think he liked you. I think you made his life easy and comfortable and I think he was genuinely glad to be around you. She said but that is not the same as love. Said no. It is not. She nodded slowly and looked back down at Pepper. She said okay. She said I just needed to know what I was grieving. Because it changes the size of it. That sentence has stayed with me. I needed to know what I was grieving because it changes the size of it. She was right. You cannot grieve properly for something you have not named. You cannot measure a loss you will not look at directly. She was doing one of the bravest things a person can do. She was naming the thing exactly what it was. Not making it bigger to justify her pain. Not making it smaller to manage her dignity. Just the real size of it. Set out plainly on the table so she could start to understand it. In the weeks after that day people found out what had happened. The way people in a community always find out things. Through the regular movements of shared life. Who sees who at the grocery store? Who calls who on a Sunday? Who mentions something quietly over a fence? The story moved through our world in pieces, and each piece landed in the ears of someone who made their own small quiet decision about what to do with it. Invitations that did not come. Conversations that did not continue. Doors that did not open again the way they had before. Derek left town about 6 weeks later. I heard it from Earl, who heard it from someone at the hardware store who had seen a moving truck at Derek's apartment complex. I did not feel anything complicated about that. I felt something simple. I felt like the air had cleared a little. Like when a window you did not realize was painted shut gets opened. Patricia I have seen twice since then. Once in the pharmacy and once at the gas station. We did not speak. I looked at her when our eyes met and she looked away first. That told me everything I needed to know. Nadia went back to work 2 weeks after the wedding that was not a wedding. She said staying home felt worse. She said keeping busy was not running away from it. She said it was just choosing to also still be a person while the hurt was happening. I thought that was wise. I thought that was exactly right. She is a physical therapist and she spends her days helping people relearn how to use parts of themselves that have been damaged or stopped working right. She said once that her job is basically just reminding people that they are more capable than the damage made them feel. I think about that connection sometimes. The work she does with her patients and the work she was doing on herself in those weeks. The same principle. Reminding yourself that you are more capable than what happened to you. Reminding yourself that the damage is real and also that it is not the whole story and it is not the last chapter. She did not come to that understanding quickly or easily or without crying about it more than once. But she came to it. She got there. My girl got there. I knew she would. She told me about 4 months later that she had started seeing someone. She said it very carefully. She said I am not calling it anything yet. I am just spending time with a person who seems honest and I am paying very close attention. She said I am watching how he talks about other people when they are not around. I am watching whether what he says on Monday matches what he does on Thursday. She said I am not going in blind this time. Not because I am afraid. 'Cause I am awake. There is a difference between those two things and I finally understand it. I met him a couple months after that. His name is Marcus. He is a teacher. He coaches a middle school basketball team on weekends. He shook my hand and looked me in the eye and asked me genuine questions about my life. He remembered what I said and he asked follow-up questions about it the next time. He does not talk about money. He talks about his students and his family and a road trip he took years ago across the country and what he saw along the way. I noticed all of that. I noticed it the way Nadia taught me to notice things. Carefully. I am not going to say he is the one. That is not my call to make. But I am going to say that when I watch them together I feel something I did not feel watching Nadia and Derek. I feel like I am watching two people who are actually seeing each other. Not a plan. Not an angle. Not a set of resources. Each other. Two actual people with their eyes open choosing to be in the same room and meaning it. That is what love looks like when it is the real thing. You can see the seeing. You cannot fake that part. I want to talk for a moment about the thing I almost did not do. That morning in the corridor when my feet stopped and I heard those voices I had a choice. I could have kept walking. I could have told myself I was not sure what I heard. I could have decided it was not my place. I could have thought about those 200 guests and that perfectly decorated garden and all that food and all those plans and I could have decided the cost of stopping was too high. I could have done all of that very easily. The path of least disruption was right there. I did not take it. Not because I am brave in some dramatic movie way. Because I am Nadia's mother. And being her mother means I do not get to choose the comfortable option when the real option is still available. Being her mother means I show up before she knows she needs me. It means I stand in the places that are hard to stand in because she needs someone standing there. Gerald would have done the same. Gerald would have walked into that groom's suite with his chest out and his voice steady and he would not have blinked. I tried to be worthy of that example. If you are a parent watching this, listen to what I am telling you. Your instincts were put there for a reason. They were built by years of loving your child and watching the world and learning the difference between what things look like and what they are. Do not dismiss them because the timing is inconvenient. Do not silence them because the room is full of people. The fullness of the room is not your responsibility. Your child is your responsibility. And sometimes your most important job happens in a corridor when nobody is watching and everything is on the line. Nadia called me last Sunday morning. Just to talk. She was making breakfast and had the phone propped against the coffee maker, and we talked for an hour about nothing important and everything important the way mothers and daughters do on slow Sunday mornings. At the end she said, "Mama, I love you." I said, "I love you too, baby." She said, "I mean it. I know you know that. But I mean it especially." I said, "I know. I know you do." We hung up and I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee going cold and Pepper at my feet, and I thought this right here. This is what I saved. That Sunday morning phone call. That easy hour of talking about nothing. Her laugh in my ear when I said something funny. The fact that she is out there in her life with her eyes open and her trust in herself intact and her heart still willing to love carefully and honestly. That is what was almost taken. Not the money. Not the property. Or the whole living, breathing, trusting, beautiful version of her. I stopped a wedding. I would stop 100 weddings. For that one Sunday morning phone call. Every single time. This has been Godfred's story time. I will see you next time. And until then, trust your gut. Has never stopped loving you.
Thank you very much for being with me till the end of this story. Kindly subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so, and tell me what you've learned from this story so far, because I didn't get time to sit here and listen much of the story. So you can summarize it or tell me what you've learned from this story in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel too. We will be bringing you more amazing stories this week, so don't miss out any story at all. Thank you very much.